Please welcome Mr. Greg Scholl.
Wow.
Thank you. Like many of you, I took a boat down here this morning, but glad that everybody made it here despite the torrential flood. On behalf of the board, staff, and orchestra of Jazz Lincoln Center and our partners at Jazz Times, Lee Mergner, welcome to the 3rd Annual Jazz Congress. We're very excited to see you all here in the House of Swing. The energy, dynamism, every space full of musicians and the people who work on behalf of the music, the positive spirit. Thank you for bringing the hall alive and animating its purpose. This is the reason this hall exists. We hope you feel at home here, that you have a fun, fulfilling time and enjoy these 2 days with us. This Congress continues to grow. We include more people from the jazz community near and far. We hope we can all harness the insight and enthusiasm generated during these 2 days and take it back into our cities and communities. Jazz lifts people up and brings them together, and we desperately need that magic in our country right now. So in the meantime, we're grateful for these 2 days together to learn, share, and be inspired with each other. Thanks to the Jazz at Lincoln Center team and the many volunteers who contributed to make this happen. When you see them, thank them. They have their badges. You can say hello, introduce yourself, and say thanks. A particular thanks to Aaron Bisman, who has not slept for the past month and whose office looks like the headquarters of a political campaign, hopefully a winning political campaign. And to Gabrielle Armand, who continues to lead this event and all of our advocacy efforts with commitment, conviction, and intelligence. Most of all, thanks to our 2 founding and sustaining sponsors, Adam Rose and the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and we should definitely give them a round of applause. Without them, this event would not be possible. They make it possible for us to be here together. Adam, I've known Adam a long time. He's a spontaneous, dynamic leader. He took his family business to new heights. Considering this whole place is named after his dad, that's no small feat. Adam is instinctively generous, and he's also a swinging jazz pianist. Maureen Knighton is the program director for the arts at the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and many of you know Maureen because of the many programs and artists she supports. She's a community builder. She's fiercely committed to leveling the playing field for the arts and for people who create it across dance, theater, and music, including jazz, and all those who benefit from it across so many different parts of our society. Maureen, thank you for your recommitment to this important community event, our Jazz Congress, and for helping to bring everyone together in this way. Please join me now in welcoming Maureen to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very pleased to be here with you on behalf of the board and staff of the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and as we say around the office, on behalf of Doris herself, who loved jazz and studied jazz piano during her lifetime. We've made it our mission, of course, to keep that going, to keep that fire burning by supporting institutions, events, and artists who love jazz as much as we do around the country. We do that, I have to say, in partnership with a number of other institutions, including but not limited to Chamber Music America and a number of others like Jazz at Lincoln Center and this Jazz Congress. We've heard from many of you the importance of a venue to regularly convene, to connect with one another, to sharpen your professional skills, and to spread the fever for jazz to those who haven't caught it yet. We're really happy to hear this keynote today and to continue to advance the work of spreading the gospel around jazz around the country. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the Jazz Times and the co-producer of this Congress in 2020, Mr. Lex Mergner. Lee, I said Lex, but it's Lee Mergner.
I kind of like Lex. That is. I think that could be an upgrade there. Anyway, I'm here, of course, to introduce the award. The Bruce Lundvall Visionary Award was created in 2014, and it was to honor the legacy of a longtime record executive who was such an important champion and advocate for jazz artists, but also he was a friend, colleague, and mentor to many of us here. The award recognizes someone who has shown extraordinary leadership and vision in expanding the audience for jazz, and who's really made a difference for the artists, the music, and the audience. The first recipient in 2015 was Randall Klein of SF Jazz. I think Randall's here. But followed by Bryce Rosenblum, Chris McBride, Terry Lynn Carrington, and last year, Darlene Chan. Every one of these individuals is still actively making a difference for the music. This year, we're proud to present the award to Dr. Barry Harris, whose work as a musician, educator, and mentor has had an enormous impact on the jazz community for more than a half a century. And with us today to talk about Dr. Harris and to present him with the award is another legend of jazz piano. Please welcome Kenny Barron.
Thank you. I can't tell you what a thrill it is to present this award to Mr. Harris. He's been a profound influence on me and many, many others. And just to illustrate very briefly his concern and his care, I think back to an incident, and he probably doesn't even remember this, an incident at the Tin Palace. And I was sitting in, I think Benny Bailey was the trumpet player, and they called a song that I didn't know. And I was really struggling with the chord changes. And Barry very quietly came up behind me and whispered the changes in my ear. So that's something I never, ever forgot. And so it gives me great, great pleasure to present this award to Mr. Barry Harris, Lifetime Achievement. I can think of no one more deserving than Dr. Barry Harris.
Oh, thank you,
sir.
Thank you, sir. Oh, my goodness. And say, oh, got to be a lock somewhere. You know. Fabian? Get this. I'd like to say, I should say a few words. First thing I'd like to say is my GoFundMe. Thanks. Because I sure didn't want to stay in that hospital in Italy. And I say, please get me home. And they got me, 3 days, they raised the money to get me home, so. So I'd like to say thanks to all the people who helped me come home. I've had, I've spent my life believing in jazz. I've traveled the world to make sure that people knew about jazz, because our country sort of started neglecting it a little bit. So I started traveling. So I've done a lot of traveling. I've done too much traveling, you know. So I've never had a chance. It's so weird. When I travel, the last class I had in Rome had 22 nations represented in my class. They came from all over Europe to Rome to be in my class. I can't even get that kind of representation here. I mean, I can't get that here, but I can get it in Rome, and I can get it in Verona, and I get it in other places. I can get it in Madrid, you know. I would love to have it in USA because I think we're supposed to be the hippest people. You know, US to me. I mean, I go to them. I present to. I don't lie, but I know who's supposed to be the hippest is us. You know, but I haven't been able to get. Most of the schools I don't agree with in the first place, because they start talking about different things, and I say, what? They say you got to know all the modes. I say, the modes? What the hell is that? I've been playing jazz about 70-something years, and I had never heard of a mode. So I say, something is off here. A mode to play jazz? So there's a lot of things that goes on I don't believe in. I'm the oldest teacher. I am the oldest teacher on this planet. Because not only can I teach you, I can sit here and make you play licks. I can sit here and make you know things. I can sit here and sing things to you. And then I go to the piano and play them for you. See, I'm not a piano teacher who can't play. Forget that's part of it. So I believe, I don't want to make this so long, but thanks to all of you for being here. And, well, all I guess. Thank you. Wait a minute, you see. I guess that's it for me, right? Now, did you look in there to find the money? Oh, darn. I thought sure there's gonna be some money in there. But, oh, the check is in the mail. Oh, that's beautiful. The check is in the mail. But you know what? They got me here. You know, I'll tell you what it cost to get me here. $66,000. I had to have a private plane with 2 doctors, Richard Clements, the pilot and the co-pilot. Small plane, but boy, it was a beautiful ride. Oh, my goodness. I mean, I can understand why people have their own plane. Because it was the most beautiful ride you'd ever imagine. We stopped in Iceland to refuel. We stopped in Goose Bay or something in Canada to refuel. We came here, but it was a beautiful ride, and I want to thank you, because there wasn't no way in hell I would have gotten here without your help. That's out. See, $66,000 is quite a lot of money somewhere. I mean, I got a couple of friends who got that kind of money, but I don't know if they were willing to give it up, you know. But I'm glad we raised it. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. And you know, I haven't paid everything yet, though. I still owe. So I gotta pay a couple of ambulances. I gotta pay for this. I gotta pay for that. But I've had a beautiful existence, because I've done what I wanted to do. You know, jazz has been my life. Sheila Jordan, is she still here? Well, let me tell you about Sheila Jordan. See, when we grew up, the first time we all heard Bird, that was it. Believe me when I tell you, Sheila knows just as much about Bird as I do, because we believed all the way through all the other music, all the other things, all the this here, that there, what that over there, or But watermelon man, see, I couldn't hear Bird playing Watermelon Man. I'm sorry. You know, and this here, that, what, that, there, and all that. See, so we went through all of that. We still believed in what we believed in. Sheila kept it going, and I have kept it going. I believe in Bird and Diz. They were the innovators. They were the brilliant ones. Bird and Diz and Bud Powell. There's not one piano player that can play like Bud Powell. You know what? Back years ago, see, everybody got a lot of piano players. They like Keith Jarrett, they like Chick Corea. I remember when Keith Jarrett and Chick Corea came to New York. I thought Chick Corea was going to be the best. You know, I did think that for a minute. At the very beginning, I really did. It's honest. I wasn't that. I appreciated Keith Jarrett for another reason. I won't tell you, but you know, it's so many, and we have so much. And see, if you had asked Wynton Kelly, Bill Evans, John Lewis, Hank Jones, me, if you had asked us who is the best pianist in the world, some of us would say, well, you know, we think Art Tatum. But you know, most of us, the young ones like this, there's only one name you say, Bud Powell. So nobody, I don't care how they play, they got to show me, because it seemed like Bud Powell knew everything. I don't understand that. I could tell you a story that Frankie Hewitt and them went by Bud Powell's house one morning, knocked on the door opened, Bud Powell was playing Embraceable You. They tried to get him to go out and just go and get high and stuff. He said, no, he playing Embraceable You. So they went and got high all day and came back that night stumbling and everything, knocked on his door, Bud Powell was still in there playing Embraceable You. So see, Bud Powell is very special. You know, and I wish that we appreciated him as much as we should, because in him, I don't know how he learned so many things. He's the only one that you really can say, if you listen to him play, you're going to learn something. He's going to play something that nobody else has played. He's fabulous, I tell you. So I give up. It's time for me to go. Not that other place, though. No. Hey. See.
Let's have another round of applause for this great.
I must go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wynton Marsalis.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. We're here now to talk about Betty Carter. She was so instrumental in the development of our institution, Jazz Lincoln Center, as she was, of course, so central to our music. She believed that jazz is meaningful music. Her mission was jazz. And when your mission is meaningful, and that meaning becomes a passion, and that passion is unhindered to shape your experience, and your experience is focused on recreating the victories of that mission, then you embody what you serve. That's exactly what she did. You become your mission. And even in the most difficult times, when resources become strained or even depleted, instead of a crisis of faith, you experience a renewal of belief. That is what we need in this moment, and that is why Betty Carter is so very important, so vital to the identity of this music in this time. She was a woman of deep, deep integrity. She brought so many great musicians forward. You're going to hear from them today. She was uncompromising, fantastic composer, innovator of song, innovative arranger, great teacher, unbelievable advocate. Any box there is to check, her name is there. She is the most profound force, creative force that I ever encountered in the music as a younger person. The respect for her from all of us was unquestioned. She represented our music with such dignity, style, clarity, speaking on the bandstand. And when we started Jazz at Lincoln Center, she was always here for us to do concerts, to make calls, to do things not paid. She was unbelievable. And I'm sure that we're about to hear a great conversation about this iconic woman. Please welcome Miss Rene Marie.
Welcome, everyone, to our panel discussion about the legacy of Betty Carter. This is going to be, or so the program says, an in-depth look at the influence of this legendary vocalist from three perspectives. First, the perspective of her as a musician, the second as an entrepreneur, and the third as an educator or mentor. Look at these wonderful people lined up to talk about Betty. Hi. Before we get started, I just wanted to, these are my little notes. I just wanted to introduce the musicians. I wrote the musicians. The panel members, I wrote just a little bit about them. This particular panelist said that of Charlie Parker, that I want to sing on the drums the way Charlie Parker sings on the horn. Please welcome to our panel, Mr. Greg Hutchinson. I reached out to this next panelist to ask her if there was anything in particular about Betty that she wanted to highlight. Her answer astounded me and made me so proud to be part of this panel. Please welcome our esteemed guest, Dee Dee Bridgewater. Our next panelist is not a musician at all, but she is an entrepreneur. She was a founding partner of the first African-American female law firm in New York. She's the president of her own company and her own artist management company. What she said about Betty, I credit her with teaching me most of what I know. Please welcome Miss Gail Boyd. Now, this next panelist, there was just so much written about him. It's going to take too much time to even talk about this, but I can say he is a Philly native, a 6-time Grammy winner. He is the producer and host of Sirius XM's The Lowdown and NPR's Jazz Night in America, Mr. Christian McBride. On this next panelist's website, there's a picture of him stooped down talking to a little boy. The boy's back is to the photograph, but you're looking into this panelist's eyes, and in it you see this honesty and engagement that's evident in his essays that he writes, in the music that he composes, and the way he performs. Mr. Benny Green. This Grammy-nominated bassist is also a producer, composer, arranger, and an example of his exceptional fluidity and dexterity are evident in Betty Carter's signature tune, Tight, Mr. Curtis Lundy. When this panelist was a little boy, his father bought him a toy drum set. And he graduated from LaGuardia High School for Music and Arts. His first professional engagement was with Lee Konitz in 1977. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenny Washington. Have I left anybody out? My goodness gracious. Yes. This next panelist was classically trained as a timpanist at first, until he took lessons from Ellis Marsalis in VCU in Virginia, and his love for jazz was deeply established at that time. Mr. Clarence Penn. Okay, so you guys, we just want to talk. I know it looks formal up here, but just want to loosen up a little bit, and feel free to interrupt one another. Let's like we're in somebody's living room, okay? Like we're at home. All right. So the first question, I'm sorry for my papers. Stay organized. Oops. The first of my questions is, when and how did you first meet Betty Carter? If each one of you could just briefly tell us when and how.
I'll start. And excuse my voice, I'm a little hoarse. I graduated from law school in 1975, and by 1978, I was representing Betty Carter. I don't know how that happened, but I saw her in Chicago. I'm from Chicago, and she, you know how you pay a little extra and you can go to the reception, and I was standing there like this little puppy, and I heard her say, "I just wish somebody could get me on the black college circuit." This was in 1978. And I said, "Oh, I know how to do that." And she said, "Okay, how?" And I gave her this long explanation, and she said, "Young lady, I can tell that you don't know what you're talking about. But I like your spirit." She said, and so she said, "Here's my phone number. Whenever you're in New York, give me a call." So I ran home and I told my husband, I had a 2-month-old baby, that's why I know it was 1978. I told my husband, "I have to go to New York, I have an appointment with Betty Carter." I bought a ticket, I went to Betty Carter with my 2-month-old baby, which she immediately took in her arms, and we sat and she said, "Well, what do you know how to do?" And I said, "Wills, I can write a will." She said, "Okay." She said, "Do my will," and I did. It was very simple. It was almost like one that you could just get from a stationery store. So I did her will, and I had her sign it, and she said, "So how much do I owe you?" I said, $100. So she wrote a check for $1,500, and this was in 1978. And I said, no, I said $100. And she said, "But I'm giving you this so that you can now say that your client is Betty Carter. You owe me hours." And that's how I started.
Anyone else want to go and talk about how they... That was hard to beat right there.
Well, I think the first time I met Betty, actually, I was doing jazzmobiles at the time, a lot of, the outdoor concerts during the summer. And there was a gentleman by the name of George. I never knew his last name. But it just so happened that, in a given summer day in New York City, there might be about 4 or 5 jazzmobiles in different boroughs, Queens. But it just so happened by coincidence that me and this guy, George, we were always on the same jazzmobile float, and that's how we became friends. So one day I was sitting at home, and the phone rings. Pick up the phone. "Hello? Hi, this is Betty Carter. How would you like to join my band?" Now, I had seen Betty before in New Jersey. I was working with a vocalist, and I worked with her. This is a local yokel from out in Jersey. So she found out that Betty was going to be on the same bill, and she completely freaked out and split, but I still got my bread. And so Betty comes on, and that's the first time I saw her, and I said right then and there, I must have been about 16, 17. I said, one day, I'm going to work with Betty Carter. So anyway, she called me up, and so then I went to her house, and so she had a drummer that was working with her at the time, and she says, "Well, he hasn't grown at all, and I'm lead somebody else." And that's what she had told this guy, George, that was on the jazz. And George is the one that recommended me for this gig. So anyway, I get to her house. So the first thing she does is I shook her hand. She says, "I like a harder handshake than that." So that's better. So we go up. She had this practice room. So I went in the practice room, right? And so then she's passing. John Hicks was in the band. There was a bass player by the name of Ratso Harris. I mean, he didn't last too long, but he was in the band for a minute, man. But anyway, so we all sit up there, and she's passing out music. And so I said, "Well, Betty, where's my music?" She says, "Music? Oh, you have to learn this stuff by heart, love." let's see how fast the kid can play. My favorite things, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, bam! And so that's how I joined the band. The drummer that I replaced, man, I mean, she fired him, but this guy didn't speak to me for 2 or 3 years, man. I didn't even do anything to him. Jeez, man. But that's how I joined Betty Carter. I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, because, you know, I'm gonna let somebody else have it, but one thing about Betty, you had to have a strong constitution to be around her, because man, if your game wasn't right at any point in time, she would call you out on it. You know, I have some other stories, but you know, we'll get into that later. Yes, thank you.
I wanted to ask you though, Kenny, what is did you say Jazzmobile?
Yeah.
What is that?
Doris, Jazzmobile is like an institution in New York City. When I was coming up, man, I mean, Jazzmobile in the summertime, they had free jazz concerts. You know, they're still, I know. And so, I mean, this was incredible, man. And when I was a kid, you know, my parents couldn't afford to take me to clubs, and plus they weren't letting kids in clubs back in those days. Right. And this was my only source to hear live jazz. I mean, I saw Don Byas, Lee Morgan, Hank Mobley, Wilbur Ware, Art Blakey. Yep. I mean, I saw all these people. See, so Jazzmobile, it's still around in the summertime, and it's free.
But what is it?
It's like it's on a float. It's like on a truck.
Oh.
It's like on a truck. It's like a flatbed truck.
Yes.
And you have music. You usually start about 7 o'clock and would go until about 9 o'clock. Musicians playing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
It was started by Dr. Billy Taylor
and then Dave Bailey
and Paul West.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was a secretary when I first moved to New York. I was a secretary for Paul West and Dr. Taylor.
Okay.
And so I had to help them with the programming of all of the floats that would go out. And yeah, it was an amazing, it is an amazing, amazing organization. Yeah.
It's still around. I mean, it's still around, but that was my source for, I saw Charles Mingus. I saw everybody, man. That's how I was able to see any of these people that I was listening to on records. And so when I got of age, when I started doing Jazzmobiles, I would just start doing them, you know, because I didn't care about the money, because I was playing for the people. These were people up in Harlem, man. I mean, that maybe necessarily didn't have that kind of bread to come downtown to work. So anytime they say Jazzmobile, I was on. I played with Milt Jackson. I played with all kinds of people in there. And the people that would come out, I would be walking down, be up in Harlem, be walking, there goes the Jazz Maniac. Hey man, we was listening on your radio. I mean, it's a community of people, especially up there at Grant's Tomb.
Well, thank you. Thank you so
great,
much,
man.
Kenny. Thank you. Dee Dee, since you've already started, would you like to share with us how you met Betty?
I don't exactly know how I met Betty. I think that I went to see her in concert or at a club. I know that I went up to her afterwards and introduced myself to her and said that I was, you know, I had just moved to New York, and, you know, I was married to Cecil Bridgewater at the time, and that I would like to hang out with her. And she said, "Oh no, baby, you can't do that." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, would you mind if I just show up at your gigs?" And she said, "I don't mind that at all." And so I would buy a ticket, and I would go to see her wherever she'd be playing in New York. And I would always ask the venue if I could have a table by myself, and I would just sit mesmerized. So after a few dates, she called me over on a break, and she said, "Okay, I see you coming to see me. You want to come to my house?" And I was like, and so she lived on St. Felix. And at that time, she was married with Danny Mixon. And so I went over to their brownstone, and I saw the albums, Betcar Productions, and she had her albums in various stages of packaging. And so she talked to me about the importance of having your own record company and how she had her label and how she did everything. And so then I asked her at her house, I said, well, you know, Betty, can I sit in on your rehearsals? I want to understand how to do. She said, oh, no. You cannot do that. So she said, I want you to learn on your own. I want you to come into this on your own. So you just keep coming down to the club. I'll let you come and hang with me. And so that's all I would do. And then she let me work with Danny Mixon. I said, well, if I can't be with Betty, so I called her up one day and I said, can I work with your husband? She said, yes, you can do that. And so I would work with Danny Mixon. At the time I was doing The Wiz. And I would, after The Wiz, go and do these gigs with Danny Mixon, just in duo. And then she wanted me to move on St. Felix. And I went and looked at a brownstone when it was open with Cecil, and we were going to do it because she wanted to create this musicians block on the side of BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And Stafford James was there, and John Stubblefield was there, and yeah. Huh? Yes, that's right. Yeah. So it was this amazing block. But we didn't buy. We ended up buying out in Hempstead. But she would never, with me, our relationship was, we never spoke about the music. She just would let me be around her. And throughout her career, and then when I was living in France, when she would come over, I would always go and hear her perform. And I remember after she had done the duet album with Carmen, and I was like, Betty, can we do it? She said, no, I'm not doing an album with you. I did that one, that's all I'm doing. And then she was touring once with Abby, and I said, well, you touring with Abby? She said, no, Dee Dee. And I was like, but I do remember before she passed, someone told me that she was sick, and I called her home, and Ora Harris was managing her, and Ora answered, and she said, oh, Dee Dee. And then Betty's in the background, she said, I've been waiting for your call. I was like, okay,
That's
Betty.
beautiful.
She said, I am giving you authorization to do tight. I am writing it in my will. You are the only person that I'm authorizing to do tight, and I've never done it.
You've never done it? Oh, boy.
But maybe, I mean, I did it once when I did a tribute to Betty at the Chicago Jazz Festival. But Betty is just so strong. I've just started doing material of Betty's. I'm doing material from her Feed the Fire album because she was working with Jerry Allen.
Thank you so much for your comments. We'll get more later.
That's okay, that's enough, I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Curtis Lundy, how about letting us know when and how you first met Betty?
Thank you. Well, I met Betty, actually, I got a call from Jack Whittemore, who was Betty's agent at the time. Actually, he was everybody's agent, who was anybody in jazz. He was Dexter's agent. He was, at that time, he was McCoy's agent. He was Art's agent. He was everybody's agent. And so he called me, and he had this really different voice. Curtis. I was like, who is this? And he said, this is Jack Whittemore. Would you like to play with Betty Carter? I said, I couldn't believe it. And I said, sure, I would love to. I don't know if I can, but, you know. He said, well, be over at 117 St. Felix tomorrow at 3 o'clock or something like that. I said, okay. And I hung up the phone and picked up my bass and started practicing. So the next day, I go up under the big clock in Brooklyn, and that's where I met Kenny and John. And I'm seeing John Hicks, and this is one of the greatest piano players we had so much respect for. And so I take my bass out, and I'm trying to I'm nervous as can be, and So we played something, I think we may have played something like I Could Write a Book or something like that, one of those tunes Betty called. And so the charts that she had were like, see how you laugh? The charts looked like they had been through the war. And, but you had to, make sense of it, and there was all, because everybody who played in the band, they would make their little notes and everything like that. So I was like, okay. So I tried to make sense of it. Anyway, I really wasn't ready for that gig, but Betty heard something and saw something in me and told me that, listen, you got a good sound, and you got a good beat. We'll work on the rest. And that's how I met Betty Carter.
Thank you so much, Curtis. Mr. Green, would you like to regale us with your story of how you met Betty and when?
My pleasure, Miss Marie. Hello, everyone. I was playing a club in Seaport, Long Island called Sunny's Place.
Oh my God.
With a vocalist. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. And someone told us we were in the middle of the first set, and someone came up to the bandstand and said, Betty Carter's in the audience. And so I just locked my eyes down on the keyboard. We finished the first set, and I went to the dressing room and hid. And, and I just lay in the dressing room until someone came and said, it's time to start the set. And so I just tried to just walk quickly, again with my head held down, to the bandstand. And it was an elevated bandstand with about 3 wooden steps you climbed. And I was just in the middle of these steps, and I felt a sharp tap on my left shoulder. And I turned around, and because I was on the steps, it was Betty, and she was up in my face, but she was below me because I was elevated. And she said, you sound good, kid. You got a telephone number? And I nodded, and I jotted it down. I gave it to her. She said, my secretary will be in touch with you. And in the morning, her secretary, her maiden name was Gail Curry, and she telephoned me and said that Betty was going to be holding auditions for a new piano player, and that I had 2 weeks from the point of her telephone call until the date of the audition. So I had about $60. This was early 1983, about like March of '83. I had about $60, and in '83, $60 you could buy a few used records with that. So I went to the record store, and I got The Audience with Betty Carter, which has Mr. Lundy and Mr. Washington on it, and Mr. Hicks. And I got Inside Betty Carter, and Now It's My Turn. I got about 5 records, and I slept with them. I made cassettes, and I would just listen to them while I was sleeping, and I would play along with the records. And I noticed early on that she just had this hookup with John Hicks, the way they played off of each other. And I had been going to hear John live at the Village Vanguard and at Bradley's. But I tried during those 2 weeks to kind of get a little more inside of his feeling. And just, there was definitely this electricity between the two of them. So I came to the audition, and the drummer was Louis Nash. He was 24 years old at the time. And I was about to turn 20. The bassist is not in the business anymore. His name was David Penn. And Betty introduced us, and she said, why don't you gentlemen play a little bit? I'm going to be downstairs. And she was making some chicken. So we jammed for about 3 songs, and I'd never played with a drummer as hip as Louis Nash before. It just felt so good. I was having a good time. And then at that point, Betty came upstairs, and she said, oh, it seems like you guys like playing with each other. She said, let's try reading some things. And one by one, she started pulling out some charts. And after maybe the 3rd song, she said, all right, I'm satisfied. Would you like to join the band? I said, yes. So then she said, okay, we're going to try a ballad. We're going to play a ballad, rather. And she said, she looked to the other members, and she said, when we play this song, I want you to think about the last time you made love. And then, you know, you heard this story. This is real. And then...
I believe it, I believe it.
So then she turned to me, locked in on me, she said, you use your imagination. It's real. That's real. But now here's the thing. This is what makes Betty.
How does she know? How does she know?
So this is what a great band leader she is, because that's exactly what I did. I used my imagination, and the guys thought about, you know, what they were thinking about. And I was just thinking how it would be. And the thing is, it actually put us all on the same page when we played the song. And and Betty used to say to us, you know, when you play with the male instrumentalists, they don't talk about the music in the same way that I do. Yeah. And so she would use these visuals, and everything was about romance, but every stage of romance, loss and longing. So it gave us this visual sense of what each song she was singing was about. You know, she was telling a story, and it's profound. Like, just to get a taste of that, you never lose it, you know? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bennett. Gentlemen, can you decide amongst yourselves who's going to speak next?
Let's see. Well, my mentor is up here, Mr. Kenny Washington, so he can attest to my meeting Betty. I had already been playing with Red Rodney, so I came in kind of cocky, you know, and she put that to bed right away. Same thing, call, come over, the Red Room, piano. So I had time to prepare. I knew all the songs. So we start going through the songs one by one. I'm knocking them out, bang, bang, bang. And she's checking me out. She's like, yeah. So I'm thinking everything's great. She stops, stop. She said, I played with Blakey. I knew Max, I knew Philly. I don't want that now. Don't do that. Wow. Oh boy. What are we gonna do now? So that was the first time that someone had challenged me that way. And there were two people that have been so instrumental in my career, Betty Carter and Ray Brown. And Betty Carter, for the simple fact that no nonsense on the bandstand, demanded perfection every night. And if you weren't that way, you might hear this. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We can't do that tune because the kids don't know it, or something like that. So, no, but hold on. But what that made you, I never liked to hear that. So I always wanted to make sure I wasn't the one hearing it. But it makes you strive for perfection. And I think everyone up here can attest to the fact that she set the bar level so high. And trying to match that, I mean, as a young man, that was very frightening. And so everything that Benny said about, I remember the first time we played a ballad, and she said to the whole band, she said, boy, you boys don't know nothing about making love. Because she said, wow. She said, okay, space. And you know, those ballads be so slow. And but you know what? After you leave her band, there's a lot of things you understand about what she's talking about. Like, the ballad is so slow and it's so beautiful, and you can hear like a dime drop. Right. And the way that she played the music, everyone who's come through her band, Mogul Miller, I was just thinking about him the other day, all these great musicians who, some of them are not with us, and are not up here, great drummers. She trained great drummers, great bass players, and great pianists. And if you look at all the people that have come through her bands, they really are incredible musicians. So everyone sitting here is offspring of Betty Carter. So that was my first meeting with her.
Thank you so much, Greg.
You can go. You're McBride. I'd rather go for my man here. So she definitely always said, make love to the drums. And I had never heard that before. I was like, what are you talking about? Make love to the drums. She was like, don't bang the cymbal, don't. And, you know, it took about, I don't know, about 3 or 4 weeks before I figured out what she meant when she referred to making love on the drums. You know, so I used to play, you know, I play a ballad with brushes, and she'd be like, shh, shh. And if you didn't get quiet, then she'd take the sticks out of the brushes out of your hand, or really embarrass you, you know, on stage. And I didn't want that. And so I put the brushes down and I started playing with my hands, you know, like Papa Joe. And she turned around, she looked at me, she gave me that wink. She was just like, there you go, you're learning. And so, but getting back to the first time I met her, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. So in 10th grade, she came to our high school to do a clinic. And she tore a new butt into all those kids that played. I mean, it was rough. And I didn't get on the drums, but I was definitely nervous to, you know, to experience that. And a few years later, I came to New York with Rodney Whitaker, a great bassist. She was looking for a bass player. And I walked in the house, and of course I was a little nervous because I remember the last experience. And, you know, they played, it was Winard Harper, Rodney, and they played, but she still had this kind of tough kind of energy. But she looked at me, she said, yeah, I kind of remember you from Detroit. And fast forward to Greg got
I got fired quick.
Greg
Come
got
on,
fired.
tell it right.
I came in right after Greg. But Greg was
Joe
being,
Henderson was
Greg was
calling
being
home.
Greg. No. So Lewis Nash recommended me, and right after I graduated college, and he said, Betty might be calling you. And I was in West Virginia at the time doing this gig that I hated. And so Betty called on a Saturday morning, and I didn't think it was Betty. She was just like, it's Betty Carter, you know, playing the band. I was just like, you're right, you know. And she said, look, if you want this gig, you need to be in New York tomorrow. This was like, you know, I was like, Betty, I got a gig. You know, she said, either you want the gig or not. I was like, okay, I'll be up there tomorrow. I packed up the truck. I drove. I was up probably 24, 26 hours straight. And I get to New York. A friend of mine was staying on Dean Street. And I called Betty. I said, Betty, I'm here. She said, where are you? I said, I'm here on Dean Street. She said, what are you doing here? We're rehearsing here on St. Felix. You need to be over here now. And I was like, okay. Had no sleep. I walk in, Cyrus Chestnut's there. This guy named Ariel Rowland was there. And we started playing right away, and we went on the road like three days later, 3 weeks, came back home for 3 weeks, and went on the road for 6 weeks of one-nighters. Never experienced that in my life. I packed a big suitcase, because I didn't know. You don't pack a big suitcase when you're doing one-nighters for 6 weeks. I learned that when I got to Poland. Me and Cyrus, we both sent those big suitcases home. And yeah, that was definitely my first experience with her. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Mr. McBride, your story, please.
It was in April of 1990. I was still a student at Juilliard, and I owe this man here a lot for my relationship with Betty. He was in her trio at that time, along with Mark Carey and Taurus Mateen. And I was hanging out a lot with Hutch and Taurus and all the guys. And Taurus said, hey, listen, I think I'm going to give Betty my notice soon. You want the gig? You know, Betty's been hearing your name. She knows who you are. Are you interested? I said, yeah, put me down. So a couple of weeks go by, and Taurus calls me up. He says, hey, I'm giving Betty my notice. You're going to be hearing from her any day now. And I said, well, that's kind of hard because I don't have a phone, because at that time I was living at the Y. Those were the official dorms of Juilliard at that time. So in order to get a call, they had to call the front desk, leave a message, and you go to a pay phone and call. So Tara said, well, look, I ain't going through all that. Just here's her number. I'm going to tell her to expect a call from you. So Hutch and Doris, they said, okay, here's her number, call her such and such a day. So I call her up. I said, hi, Miss Carter, this is Christian McBride. And there was like no greeting at all. She was just like, you want the gig? I said, yes, ma'am. I would be honored to play with you. And she said, okay, well, I'm leaving for Europe in a couple of days. We'll be gone for 3 weeks. When we get back, I'll call you and let you know about the rehearsal times. So I'm just jumping up and down and doing somersaults all down the hallway and stuff. Like, man, I'm getting to play with Betty Carter. 3 weeks go by, I don't hear anything. And I'm getting nervous. I'm like, oh man, where they at? I haven't heard from Hutch, I haven't heard from Doris, haven't heard from Mark, so I assume they're still in Europe, right? And I get back from classes at Juilliard, and there's a message from Mark Carey, and it says, urgent, like bold with 5 exclamation points on it. The next piece of paper was a message from Hutch, urgent, 3 exclamation points. And there was a message from Tara that says, double urgent, 3 exclamation points. I'm thinking something's wrong, uh-oh. And so I call up Mark Carey, and I said, Mark, what's happening? He said, dude, what happened? I said, what are you talking about, what happened? He said, man, Betty's about to give the gig away. I said, I haven't heard from her. He said, no. Look, I said, Betty told me she was gonna call me when y'all got back from Europe so we could set up the rehearsals. He said, well, look, I don't know what she told you, but she about to give the gig away. And so I called up Hutch, and it was almost the same conversation verbatim. And so I called Betty, no answer. I'm like, wait another hour, call Betty again, no answer. And I'm dying, absolutely dying. And I called Doris, and the same conversation said, look, just keep calling Betty, just keep trying all night. And so I finally called her, I guess around midnight. I must have spent about $5 in quarters in the payphone that night calling her. And I finally called her. I said, Miss Carter, it's Christian McBride. She says, where were you? I said, what do you mean, where was I? She's like, I was waiting for you to call. I said, Miss Carter, I'm sorry, I don't know what got lost in translation, but I thought you were calling me when you got back from Europe to let me know what time rehearsal started. No, baby, that's not what I said. And she said, you know, it would have been nice, but I know we'll work together one of these days. Click. And so I'm crying, literally in tears, right? So I call her manager, Ora Harris. And I call Ora, you know. And she said, listen, I don't know if this is going to get you anywhere, but they're going to be rehearsing at the Drummers Collective on 14th Street. Go by the rehearsal and just rap to her and see what can happen. So y'all are rehearsing for the live album, which became Dropping Things. And in the middle of all of this, I never asked Betty who was the bass player she hired. It was my homeboy, Dwayne Burno. Now, I knew Dwayne from back in Philly. And so I go to rehearsal, and Dwayne is like, what the F you doing here? I was like, getting my gig back, MF, you know. So we all up in each other's face like Ali and Frazier, you know. So, just like Frazier, he won the first fight. Freddie Hubbard was a special guest with Betty's group for that performance. And so I'm thinking, man, not only am I not going to get a chance to play with Betty, I'm also not going to get to play with Freddie Hubbard. So Betty wasn't worried about me, nor should she have been. So she rehearsed the trio, and about a week later, Carl Allen calls and says, hey man, Freddie's bass player can't make the next gig. Can you make this gig with Freddie? So then I wound up playing with Freddie Hubbard for 2.5 years. So after I finished playing with Freddie, I get a call from Betty. I'm leaving a lot out because Betty and I became
lots of time passed from that time you kind of missed the boat, so to speak.
Yeah.
When you, okay.
But I saw Betty a lot because, you know, she would come to Bradley's or wherever I was playing and would come sit in. So we wound up becoming very cool. So she called me up. She says, hey, I want you to play on my record. And the record was called It's Not About the Melody. And Margaret Miller played piano and Lewis Nash played drums. And I can't tell you how happy I was that after that incident in 1990, here I am in the studio with her. And so we were playing Once Upon a Summertime. And she says, Christian, play intro out front. I said, yes, ma'am. So take one. I play my intro. She stops me in the middle. She says, I don't like that. Play something else. I was like, all right. Take two. Boom. I don't like that either. Like, damn, all right. Take through. And, you know, boom, 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 boom. Okay, look. Stop playing all that regular stuff. Play something that's not regular. I want to hear you do something different. I was like, yes, ma'am. So I play like the weirdest, outest bass solo I can think of. She's like, what, she gave the wink? Yeah. She was like, and that's the take that's on the record. So Betty became a great mentor, friend. She became very tight with my mom. And so, yeah, we all miss Betty a lot.
Thank you so much for that.
There's been a name, Aura Harris, that we've all talked about, and I just want to stop and give Aura credit. I want to give Betty credit for finding Aura and me and Joanne Jimenez. She was not only a mentor for the musicians, she was, when you talked about the albums on that floor, that's kind of what I was doing even as a lawyer. We were packaging things up and mailing them to record stores. Remember those? And she was doing radio. She was teaching me every single thing it was to know. And at one point, Aura was like her assistant, and there was another one in Detroit named Tony. And so it was Tony and Aura. You remember Tony? And then Tony passed away, and Aura then became her manager. But she would have been here today because all of us know and love Aura as much as we did Betty. She's a dear friend still.
Thank you for that, Gail. Thank you. And while we're on the topic of it, about her mentorship, can you tell me, under the mentorship that she did, because she did so many different things, but did she face any challenges as a mentor? What would you say? Was it hard for her as a female to be this mentor to other females and younger
when anybody
men?
would ever leave Betty's band and go to Blakey, we would have tears. Because she would say, I trained them, I got them up, they're doing well, and then they leave me and they go to Blakey. Why? But I would be like, everybody's growing, everybody wants to have different experiences, but that was a challenge she felt, because she really did put a lot into all of the musicians. I mean, she really did. She had her own unique way of teaching. I mean, the way she taught me the things that I say I know is that she would say, I know what I want to happen. You're the lawyer, you make it happen. Now here's the result. So she would give me the end game. This is, if it's a contract that you want to end it, she'd say, I want the contract ended and I want $500. Now you make it happen. I didn't go to law school, but you do that. So the challenge was always her getting what she needed without having any of the formal education that you see people now. And so, like you say, I don't like that, do it again. I don't like that, do it again. That's the way she would do me. I would come back and I'd say, well, Betty, he seems so nice. And she'd say, nice? What does nice have to do with it? And you all know that head. You know what I'm saying? Like, she would look at what does that have? So he's nice? That's all I'm supposed to accept $200 because you thought he was nice? Okay, I guess I should go back and ask for more. So she was a good mentor. And when about the duet, I just need to say real quickly.
Please.
She did the Carmen McRae, Betty Carter duet, Stolen Moments. I was the lawyer. They were coming from Kennedy Center. The two of them had been had a Valentine's concert. I don't remember who was in the band at the time. But Betty said she was bringing her suitcase, and she looked up ahead, and Carmen was bringing her suitcase. And they sat on the suitcase kind of mad because it was Valentine's, and all the band members had already gone, and they were there with their suitcases. And Carmen and Betty said, we should do an album together. And that's kind of how it started. So she came back and said, Gail, we're going to do this album. And I said, okay, let me do a contract. She said, you don't need a contract. It's just going to be me and Carmen, and we're going to do it. So she would not, I didn't know that much, but she wouldn't even let me do the stuff I did know. They did the album, and then a lot ensued, and I had to actually sue in federal court the album it came out like 6 or 7 years after, because I got an injunction and kept it off the market because of some unfair dealings. That's why she didn't want to do any more duos, because she didn't listen to me, and it was a big mess, and we finally got it. I signed her to Verve. I took her from Bet Carr to Verve, and eventually I was able to get Stolen Moments on Verve, but it took federal court settling cases, just a big mess to do it. That's why she didn't want to do any more duets.
Is there anyone else who, thank you for your comments, Gail. Is there anyone else who would like to talk about Betty's mentorship and how it maybe impacted you?
Yes.
Yes, Curtis.
Being someone who worked with Betty in, I guess, three different tours. The first one with Kenny, the second one with Louis Nash, and the third, Clarence. And her ability to hear what a musician, the end result of what a musician would sound like after she finished with him was very uncanny. And her understanding that the music was going to only live with the youth was something that was, was always in the forefront of her mind too. You got to remember, Betty could have hired anybody, but she gave us time, and she gave us the wisdom and the knowledge of the music to move forward and to develop ourselves, and thus, even going as far as the Jazz Ahead program. Betty had asked Aura and I to come up with a name for that. So that name, that's my name. I gave that name to Betty, and she said, and the way it happened was we were in Germany at the time. Clarence, remember, we were in Germany, and Betty was outside eating lunch, and I was going for a walk, and I saw her, and I said, can I sit down? And she said, yeah. I said, what you doing? She said, I'm thinking about a name for this thing I'm going to be doing at the Kennedy Center, and they want me to start building a program for youth. And so I was thinking, and I said, well, Miles Ahead, like that record. I said, what about Jazz Ahead? And she said, that's it. And that's where the name came from. So that's, Betty, not only was she, the thing that I loved about her, not only would she give you information, but she would listen to you too, and that's the sign of a great person, that, they're open to develop and still learn, and that's the thing about Betty. She was open. She didn't want to do what she did before, in the music, and she challenged all of us to do something, like Christian said, to do something different. A piano player, she was really rough on that about. No cliches. You could never play, if you were listening to your Wynton Kelly and Oscar Peterson and all that stuff, and you thought you could just play some of those licks, it wasn't happening. With all of us. So, her mentorship in that way was so important to teach you to learn your own sound and to develop your own sound and develop your own way of playing. So that's so important for all of us. I know especially for me.
And
Thank you,
I have
Curtis.
to say, if you played something she didn't like, because the trio would play a tune out front, and if I play Rim Shot like Philly Joe, or the piano player plays something, you hear from backstage, and you know you're in the wrong place. She would definitely let you know.
I was thinking of something.
Right.
You talk about mentor, and the most amazing thing about Betty was, after I left the band, was when her mentorship actually was the most important, because I was out of the band. But she would call me up, and I think I was on Washington, and she was St. Felix. I'm out of the band, so when you first leave the band, it's a little tense, depending on how you leave the band.
That's an understatement.
In my case, it was a little tense, just for about a day or two, and then she called me up. She said, hey, baby doll, Black Pearl, she used to call me. She said, hey, I see you over there, Fattest. So she said, oh, it's everything, you've served your time, it's time for you to move on. I said, oh yeah, we started talking. She said, well, what you doing now? I said, nothing. She said, well, I'm coming to pick you up. Cool. where we going? She said, oh, yeah, we're going to Philly. Okay, we drive down to Philly, cool. So I'm thinking, you know, she needs somebody to ride along with her in the Discovery that she got. I got the Discovery, and it's beautiful. And she used to sit up the steering wheel, right, and she driving. So she pulled up to the house, and I'm like, oh, wow, God, cool. She gets out the car and goes around to the passenger side.
Oh, you?
I was like, I guess somebody else is coming to drive, right? Look who's coming to dinner now. So those drives, and I think we did a bunch of those drives, and I never knew why she was going to Philly, but we just drove. We would just drive, and she would just talk about music. And she said, well, how are you doing? What's going on? You know, who you playing with and whatever and whatever. And the one thing, like Curtis said, she never wanted to get old. And that's why she had a thing about, and no offense to older musicians, but she didn't want to do that. And that's why everybody in her band was younger, because she wanted young energy. And if you sounded old, then it was time for you to go. So, and she would let you know in a nice way that, you know, you need to move on. So the mentorship came in, and I think as often, I think sometimes what it is that we play the music together, but really we're not playing music together. The reason why everyone up here got along and things worked out is because it's about friendship. Not about the music, it's about friendship. On stage, we are friends. That's why the music sounds the way it does. Any good band you hear, most of the time they get along. And her thing was like, we got along, we hung out. Now, she always wanted to keep a little friction there. So if you listen to too much music, she'd say, well, you're listening to too much music, stop. You know, so, but she always knew the right button to push to get you to do not only what she wanted you to do, but what she thought you could do. And if you didn't do it, well, oof.
Thank you, Greg. I'd like to comment on something that Gail Boyd brought to mind for me about Betty and her musicians playing with Art Blakey, because she was actually very supportive to me on that subject, because from the time I joined her band, she knew already that's what I wanted to do. And the trio, we started playing a piece that was written for Betty, but recorded by Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, written by Pamela Watson, called Miss BC. And she heard us playing it with the trio, and then Betty started singing the song with us. Betty went with me to the Village Gate to sit in together with Art, and we sung What's New together with Art. And the occasion of my leaving her band after 4 years was Art finally, he offered me the gig. And I telephoned Betty, who was in Flint visiting her sister at the time. And I said, Betty, Art Blakey has offered me the gig. And Betty said, Benny, I know this is what you've always wanted, and I give you my blessing. And this was really heavy. She came down to Sweet Basil's and heard the band after I'd been there for about a year. I'm trying to remember if you were there with her that night. She had a friend with her. Maybe it wasn't you. But okay. Well, she came down and she gave me so much love. She said, Benny, you're really doing it. That's it. The way you're playing now. And for Betty to say that's it, that never happens, because, you know, she's always constructively dissatisfied and keeps you hungry. But the thing is, this is what was really deep. Art Blakey was getting ready. He was about to fire me, and word went around New York that I was about to get fired. And Betty came down to Sweet Basil's where we were playing, and I'll never know what words were spoken, but she went downstairs to Art's makeshift dressing room, which was underneath the club, and talked with Art. And Art kept me in the band for like another year after that. And it was kind of understood that Betty actually, whatever it was she said to Art, actually saved my gig. So I just want to say she couldn't have been more supportive about me playing with Art. So grateful, yeah.
Thank you so much for the comment, Rene. Well, we have about 15 minutes left. And if we could just briefly, one at a time, talk about this one question. What did you learn most about yourself in working with Betty, playing with Betty, being one of Betty's friends, associates? What did you learn most about yourself?
Well, for me, Betty was really, I mean, she said you had to be consistent every time you walk on the stage. I mean, I remember me and Cyrus, one day we were at a spa or something, and we did the gig, and she looked at both of us. She said, "You took a bath, didn't you?" And me and Cyrus say, "Man, bro, how she know it?" Because she felt like if you took a bath, then you were too relaxed for the gig. She wanted you to be on, you know, yeah. And so even at this age, and I'm quite old, I still think about that before I do a gig. Like I'm take a shower, I'm ready to hit. I don't relax it, you know, so, you know, just to keep that consistency. But it's amazing that she could put these things in your mind. You know, I guess we're 20, but I mean, it makes sense though. You had to be on the beat and you had to play on top. And she wanted it to be snappy and crack and, you know.
She was thinking beyond. It's like she has had some insight into what makes a musician tick.
Yeah.
For her to notice that
Yeah.
about bathing, and it does relax you, and that has something to do with how you play.
I'd never heard that. Yeah, that was it.
Anyone else?
I never, as I said, I never, she would never share with me any of her musical dealings. But because she spoke to me and told me how important it was to have ownership of your music, I think my entire career I've modeled after Betty. I had never seen anyone perform and be so physical. And I'd never seen a woman command the stage and command the musicians like she did. But I started my label because Betty Carter had a label. I started producing myself because Betty Carter did that. And even to the mentoring, I've started a mentoring program that I shared with you. And this mentoring program that I'm doing has been started with the same nonprofit that worked with Betty with Jazz Ahead, and that's 651 Arts in Brooklyn. And 651 Arts they shared with me that they're hurt that Betty's program went to the Kennedy Center after they had helped to get it off the ground. But I just think, you know, Betty was from Flint, I'm from Flint. There's just something about the free spirit that she had and the generosity that she had with young musicians. And I've come into that a little later in my life, but I really understand the importance of mentoring young musicians, and all of that, all of my being, I think I can say to everybody here, came from those little moments that Betty Carter allowed me into her life. And I will always be grateful to Betty for all of that. You know, I learned to be independent and a woman because I took my cues from Betty Carter.
Thank you, dear.
Yeah.
One of the things I think I learned from Betty was, well, I guess I've always been this way, but being around her, it really hit home. Not to be a Guy Smiley. You know, one of those, yeah, okay, baby, yeah, baby, you know. She was definitely not like that. And I tell this one story, man. We went to Boston to play this club called, you were there. We went to play this place called Lulu White's. So that was actually the name of the club. So anyway, there was this guy that came in those days. You could come to the gate and meet your party. You know, it's not, security isn't like it is now back then. So anyway, there was this guy. I don't know what happened to this cat. His name was Chester English. He comes up to us. We're getting off the plane, coming from New York to Boston, shuttle plane. Hi, I'm Chester English. Betty, it's a pleasure to meet you. She looked at this guy like, now this cat didn't do nothing to him. I don't know. but I could see there was something happening right then and there. Anyway, get to the club. So we get to the club. So, all right. She says, where's the dressing room? Well, Miss Carter, the dressing room is upstairs. So all she had to do was go out of the club and go right next door and go up this elevator, and there was this penthouse. It was a very nice penthouse. Well, this went on for about 2 days. Now, it wasn't cold outside. It was at the beginning of September, so we were in Boston, but it wasn't cold. But there was this chef, this guy, I think he's one of the first African-American chefs in Boston. His name is Chef Chandler, but he loved the musicians, and you'd come down there and get a whole plate of food and everything. So after about the second day of Betty going to the dressing room, which she felt should have been in the club, she went berserk on this cat, man. She went off. So Chef Chandler used to invite me, Curtis, man, we'd go down there the next day to the club, which was open, and eat. This cat would feed us for free. Well, I went down there, and the next thing I know, I hear, where the maraschino cherries were, and all the condiments, they was building a dressing room.
Thank you for that.
They built a dressing room for Betty. And I'm telling you, I mean, when I went back there to play with Johnny Griffin a few years later, that dressing room was still there, man.
Thank you, Kenny. We only have 8 minutes left. Is there anyone else who would like to tell us?
Betty's thing, she wanted to turn out, and this is what a conversation we had one time. She said, it was myself, Doris, and Mark. She said, I want to turn out some strong black men. And that was a big thing for her. So I'll preface this story quickly by saying, with that in mind, we go to Italy, which is where I now live, and we're on a train, and anyone who's been in Italy back in those days know that they just call a train strike anywhere, in the middle of the, so we on a train, they call it train strike. So mind you, I think the show before, I'm not sure, Mark, you can tell me, but I think the night before we had a show and it was something, whatever. So we're on this train strike and we kind of vibe, and train stops. We get off the train. You said, be strong black men. So she's in her thing and we're out in our thing. So we get off the train, and of course there's a hotel in town that's only got a couple of rooms. So I remember, okay, we get the rooms. Right, here she comes. There's no room. No, but it's not like you thought. Listen, if you say be strong, then that's what we were. So we took the initiative, and because we did that, and this was another thing that came from her, something my mom used to say always also, man, don't be a follower, be a leader. Don't follow. Like my mom would say, so if that person jumps off the bridge, you gonna jump behind them? Being young, yeah, I'm gonna jump too. No. Be a leader. And so her thing was about turning out leaders, strong people. That was her thing. Like, she really was. And if you were weak, she would feed on that. And she would basically torment you until you couldn't take her.
She would eat you alive.
She would eat you alive. And there's some people that are not here that happened to. But I think in hindsight, if you think about it, her the reason she did it, though, was because she wanted to make those musicians stronger. And years later, there's a good friend of ours who's a great drummer. It actually worked. Like, I mean, it took him out a little bit, but he came back, man. He came back through. And so her thing was all about that. So that's why I always say the music that was really secondary. The message that she was trying to get through was first for me. So
thank you, Hutch. We have 6 minutes, almost 6 minutes left.
I'd like to just say this. One thing that I learned, well, not just one, everything that I learned from Betty, some of the most important things, though, was how she respected her audience and how she made you know that the most important thing were the people that came to see her and you, that you made sure that you gave them their money's worth, one. And the other thing that was very important is that, like Hutch said, developing people who would stand for something and not fall for anything. That was very important for us, as musicians, especially during the era that we came, because the music was on really, really, really dire straits when we were coming up on the scene with Betty, and we kind of helped bridge that gap to get her to the next level of her success, at that time. And she respected what the other musicians brought to the table, but she wanted you to know that what she had was special, and that if you helped develop that she would never ever forget that, and she let you know that. So in the same way, she helped us to learn how to be band leaders as well. And that was important too. She always, told us, well, when you get your band or when you're going to play with this person, you're gonna have to do this and you're gonna have to be prepared for this. So, she prepared us for, after you played with Betty, and everybody can as a testimony to this, you could play with anybody, and that's the other thing that I learned.
And what I learned was that I went to law school to become a lawyer, but she told me that I really needed to be an artist manager, because I would do the contracts and then I would see her and Aura and Tony and Joanne go off and do what I call have all the fun. And I said, well, why are you leaving me here? She said, well, you did your work, you did the contract or whatever. And she'd say, well, if you want to do this, you need to be a manager. You don't need to be, because that's what all the things you say you want to do, you didn't need to go to law school for. I'm like, now you tell me. So that's what I learned.
I just remember Betty always being absolutely fearless. There was nothing about her that if she was feeling something, if she wanted to say, we've all seen Betty say things to some of the most iconic musicians ever, and I would stand there and go, did she just say that to, and she would say, well, he ain't doing it right, I was like, wow, she is absolutely fearless. And I wonder how sometimes Betty would have fared today, because she was not always gentle when she told you what she was thinking or what she was feeling or what she wanted out of you. I don't know if it was a generational thing, but it taught me that friction is not always a bad thing. Sometimes friction is necessary to get the best out of you.
I remember you mentioning this when we were talking. You said something about tension and release.
Yeah, well, I said I think I could probably speak for all of us. Like our relationship with Betty was a constant lesson in conflict and resolution.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yes. Conflict and resolution.
But she was one of the greatest mentors we could ever have.
Thank you so much, Christian. Where are we at? Anyone have any final comment they would like to make before we end this wonderful panel discussion about Betty Carter?
I don't know. It's great to be here. Let's see. I tell you, Betty was something else, man. I'm telling you, I never met anybody like her, man. I mean, she was incredible, man. So her birthday was coming up. I'll tell this story. Her birthday was coming up. So, all right, we had some time off. But every week, at least once, you had to call and check in with her. Just small talk. So, okay. But I decided on her birthday I was gonna bake her a cake. Serious talk. And see, so now I'm trying to be cool, And I know the rehearsal is in another week, So anyway, I hadn't called her. So I baked this cake. So the rehearsal, Curtis, you were there, I think, man. So I baked this cake, so I know what time the rehearsal is. Get to the rehearsal. Buzz the buzzer. And she opens up the door. Why haven't you called me? The sharks came out of the water, man. And then, and what happened is you're standing outside and she's yelling at you, man, and people are walking up the street. So then she's getting on me. You haven't called me in a week. I mean, I told you. So she's going off. So then I says, she says, what's that you got? I said, I baked you a cake, Betty. Oh, really? You baked me a cake? Come on in, baby.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank
Wow,
you so much.
He baked me a cake. So then, all right, come in the house. Wow, Hicks was there, Curtis was there. So she cuts the cake. Wow, kid, this cake is delicious. She says, you didn't make this cake. I said, Betty, I did make the cake. Well, if you made was it Pillsbury cake? I said, no, Betty. What, was Duncan Hines? I said, no, Betty, this is a cake from scratch. I made this from scratch. Well, I don't believe you. I don't believe, in fact, I'm calling your mother. She called my mother up. Hi, Mrs. Washington, this is Betty Carter. Your son just came over here with a delicious cake. Did he really make that cake? And I could hear my mother on the phone. She's crying, she's laughing. So then she said, yeah, he made that cake. I wasn't even here when he made the cake. Really? Oh man, I didn't, But the thing is, I could never understand. I mean, if I decided to bring a cake from Entenmann's, man, it should have been cool, man. But she worried me about 15 minutes. Duncan Hines, was it Pillsbury? I said, man, I had never met anybody like her, boy. She is a classic, man.
Thank you to my panelists for your comments and history about Betty Carter. Thanks to all of you, audience, for your comments and for coming to this panel discussion. Thank you.
One other thing, there's a... No, seriously. There's a documentary. There's a documentary on Betty when we did that recording session out at the Great American Music Hall. It's fantastic. Yes, it's incredible. Now, the cat, I think he's in the audience, his name is Matt. But the thing is, if there's somebody, you need the money, there she is, stand up, Matt. Now, see, in order to get this out here so that everybody can see it, maybe somebody here has got some bread in their pocket, or they know a producer or somebody that can hook it up. So this could maybe come out like some of these other jazz documentaries, because I'm telling you, I've seen it, and it's fantastic, man. So maybe somebody knows somebody, you could do some networking, so everybody can see it, because it's really something that's incredible to see, man. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.